Hey everybody, what is going on? It's time for week 11, which means it's time for the RotoWorld DFS Pick 6 presented by RotoGrinders. I'm Eric Crane, joined once again by two of the absolute best in the business. First, we got Mr. Rich Rebar. What's going on, Reeves?
What's going on, guys? It's kind of a fun time of the year. I talked about it last week. I thought that the week was going to end up turning out fun. There was going to be a lot of actual variance in like regular what we thought were base lineups, and there certainly was. And I think when I look at this week, it's going to be pretty similar. There are a lot of just options all over the board, whatever you want to do. So I mean, it's starting to get to be a fun time of the fantasy season because as much variance there's been in this fantasy season from like a season-long stance, I feel like most weeks up until last week for DFS, like a lot of the regular plays hit. One, they hit pretty consistently all season, and two, they were kind of in our faces, for as far as, guys we want to play. So we're finally getting it mixed up and having a fun time of the year where we get different plays on the board every week.
I don't know about you, but last week was not fun for me. But Evan, I was listening to your podcast with Warren Sharp, and it turned out to be a good week for you.
Yeah, it was solid. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was great, but it was a lot better than like during the day that I expected because I think that just everybody got everything wrong. And I had enough like Garrett Selleck to put me in position. I mean, I played him in cash, and he, the reason that I played him in cash, I'm not trying to sound like a genius, was to get to Antonio Brown, who didn't do anything, but he like single-handedly saved Antonio. I mean, if you would have given me, 4 for 67 and 1 from Antonio Brown and 3 for 47 from Garrett Selleck, I would have been a little disappointed, but I would have been like, I can compete with that, and I was able to compete with that. And now we move from Garrett Selleck week to Bruce Ellington / Rex Burkhead week. Yeah,
it's funny. It turns out you actually played Garrett Selleck to get to Antonio Brown. It's funny how that works out, isn't it?
I know, isn't it? It just goes to show you how much variance there is in this sport. No one really has a high floor. No one really has a high floor. I mean, there are running backs that sort of do just because they'll get so many touches, but no one really has a great floor, especially at wide receiver.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about our first game because we're talking about running backs with high floors, and we got a couple of them in this game that are just been crushing it for DFS owners this year. It's Washington at New Orleans, total of 51, New Orleans 7.5-point favorites. Reeves, I have just been wrong on Drew Brees every single week this year. And by that, I mean I've been playing him every week, and it's just the running back that keeps crushing it. Talk to me about this New Orleans Saints offense. Like, what can we expect from them moving forward?
What doing? I mean, it's what we talked. We did those best ball shows over the summer, and we kind of talked about Adrian Peterson and why we liked him and Mark Ingram. We talked about Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson basically, I think, every 2 weeks during the summer because we thought this offensive line was one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. We thought they'd be able to score a lot of points and that they would be able to move, defensive units off the ball, and they've kind of done that. Now that they're playing defense, that in synchronicity with running the ball, it's really captured Brees. I mean, he's been under 30 pass attempts now, 5 of his past 6 games. He's still just as surgical as ever. It's just he's not involved in these shootouts, these back and forth games. They don't really require him to, put the ball up 45 times anymore. That's what's happening. I will say, though, like you, though, I mean, the thing is his price isn't dropped, so you really can't play him in cash. But, I mean, like you, there's some touchdown regression to chase, in tournaments. I mean, this is a team since they've traded Adrian Peterson and come off that bye, they've led the NFL in offensive touchdowns. They've scored 18 offensive touchdowns over that span. Just 5 have been passing. The NFL league rate for passing touchdowns is 69%. A very nice number for everyone out there. But, I mean, the Saints are not having a nice number, just 28%, over that span. So there's some positive regression we had. Rushing touchdowns are largely circumstantial to just where you get can you get on the doorstep. I mean, these guys 30-yard runs for touchdowns. They're just getting right to the doorstep and pounding them in. So there's going to be some touchdown regression. I don't know if it will be this week. It very well could be to a team that just allowed 4 touchdowns to Case Keenum, basically through, 2.5 quarters of that game. And they've allowed, Wentz got him for 4, a couple weeks ago. And someone else touched him up too for multiple touchdowns the week before. The only game that the Redskins have been good against the pass was the Dak and the rain game over their past 4 games. So, I mean, there's a chance it could be. But this is the team, when you look at the way Washington is built, they're built to, for the Saints to kind of have success with the way they've been doing. They've got two good corners on the outside, even though Josh Norman's gotten the business, 2 weeks in a row. Doug Baldwin got him out of the slot. Diggs got him twice in that game. And then Thielen had a nice catch where it was more in his own coverage, but, he kind of shielded him off. But I think it'll be a game where, listen, you just keep riding, Ingram and Kamara, you can keep playing these guys every week because they're going to get the touches. And when you look at the way the Saints are built, outside of Michael Thomas, I mean, Ted Ginn has been a nice story this year, but he only has more than 4 catches in one game. He's still Ted Ginn. He's not going to guy you're going to pump targets to. They have no tight end presence. Willie Snead hasn't been able to get on the field. Brandon Coleman is their third receiver. I mean, this is a team that their best playmakers are Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, and they're utilizing those guys to the strength of their offense. I think it's going to be more of the same, for the Saints. You can chase that touchdown regression in tournaments, but I mean, I'm going to keep playing these backs.
Evan, when I had looked last year, I had kind of been paying attention to what the Saints were doing. And when they were facing some pass funnel defenses, they were still airing it out, even if they were up big. But this year, it just hasn't been the case just because their running game has been so good.
Yeah, I remember like in my matchups column, for years, because there were so many just fantasy factors in the Saints passing game that like block of like paragraph would end up being just unwieldy each week, and I'd have to just like try to cut out words, repeatedly. But it's not really like that anymore because we don't really have to talk about Kobe Fleener. He doesn't even really play for the Saints anymore. Willie Snead hasn't had a target since week 6. Michael Thomas has been steady, non-prolific, just like his quarterback. I think that what you would need from Drew Brees at this point would be for him to throw a bunch of red zone touchdowns in a game, where they get in deep and, they reach like third down and he ends up throwing 4 in the red zone, which is very conceivable that something like that could happen. But I think that that's what would need to happen. And I think that the Saints at this point, their running game has reached a point where they are unstoppable, essentially. And the Redskins have played very good run defense this year. But I think that the Saints are an offense that they can impose their will with the running game. They remind me very much of the Cowboys. And obviously, it wasn't with like one back. They used 2 backs, but they have 5 great offensive linemen and they have 2 very good backups. And sometimes one of those great stud starters will miss time and they can just plug in one of the backups and, they can play great offensive line, both from a pass protection and a run blocking standpoint. And that's what the Cowboys were a couple of years ago. So a guy would get hurt, Ronald Leary would come in. Lyle Collins would kick over, whatever. The Cowboys don't do that anymore. The Saints do that. And I wanted to note one injury for the Redskins. So a couple of weeks ago, the Redskins lost Mason Foster, who they had been using as an every down inside linebacker. Last week, they lost his replacement, Will Compton, to a Liz Frank sprain. So both of those guys are on IR now. And, I mean, that could take away from a Redskins run defense that so far has been pretty stout.
We're looking at this game. Obviously, Mark Ingram had the big game last week. Alvin Kamara, by the way, also had the big game. How do we approach this Saints running game? Because, I've got this mental block, right? I'm like, well, I can't play 2 running backs from the same team. I think that's a reasonable mental block to have. But this Saints team is just proving that you actually can.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the week before where it was just kind of variance where Ingram didn't find the end zone, but I mean, Ingram has 1 target the past 2 weeks, which is kind of interesting. He was the guy that had 4 more targets every game of the season up until 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, you like to see him get some of that passing game involvement back. Could just be a byproduct of them not throwing. Because his routes per game are kind of in the same area. He's just not getting that, opportunity. Kamara is, I think, that got the best floor, but just because of the pass game involvement, even on a site like FanDuel, just because you're chipping away on those points. And he still is getting, carries inside the 10 as well. But yeah, I mean, I think you can play both these guys. I mean, you can't play them both in the cash lineup together, but you can definitely play. It's been proven, the past, 5 weeks, you can totally play them in tournament lineups together. They've just been reeling off RB1 performances together in unison. So, I mean, why not? Like I said, the touchdown regression is eventually going to happen. You're not going to put up, 13 touchdowns, 5 passing touchdowns regularly in the NFL. But why not just keep riding the wave here, in tournament town?
So, Evan, are you going to attack the running game here? Are you going to go with the passing game? The Saints are going to score, and it feels weird just because I have no idea where it's going to come from.
I mean, Mark Ingram is always the best play on FanDuel, and I just would play, if I'm going to use some Breeze, and I probably will, just play him with one of the RBs because he certainly can. It's a little concerning that Ingram has not been used in the passing game recently, but they really haven't had any reason to force feed him targets. And I think that this game could be a little bit more up and down than the games that they've experienced recently. So I just play him with one of his RBs. Michael Thomas is going to get a lot of routes away from Josh Norman's side, like over half of his routes away from Josh Norman's side. But I'm kind of past trying to use him in tournaments. I just don't know if he's got to score 2 touchdowns. He has to score 2 touchdowns, and it's tough to score 2 touchdowns in the same game. I mean, I think he's capable of it, but it's not easy. So I think I would just play Breeze with one of the running backs, if not both.
And Reeves, on the other side of the ball, we've got Washington. And the Saints defense has been really good. Rob Kelly, he's obviously on IR. We saw Chris Thompson get a little bit banged up last week. But I don't know. He just didn't seem to have quite as much explosion. Samaje Perine, he's going to be getting a lot of action this week, Reeves. What do you think of this Washington offense?
I mean, you got to look at Chris Thompson and like the layout for him here. I mean, the last time that Rob Kelly was inactive, Chris Thompson had 20 touches. He had 16 rushing attempts. They didn't go for a lot of yards, but I mean, they were there. I mean, this is a team I think that they just ultimately trust Chris Thompson more than Samaje Perine. I mean, Samaje Perine is a guy that consistently from the preseason throughout any opportunity he's gotten in the regular season has really not done much of anything, and he's put the ball on the carpet a few times. I think it's, you got to pay for Chris Thompson. That's the only unfortunate thing is he's not a guy that, he's not priced like the other satellite backs out there. So you've got to pay for him on either site. But if you're stacking this game, in a tournament option, like you're going to keep looking at him. I mean, the Saints, opposing teams have targeted their running backs 28% of the time against the Saints. It's the highest rate in the league. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a guy like Chris Thompson, especially if he's going to get more work in the rushing game. Jamison Crowder is kind of coming back to life here. He's not a guy you really want to play in DFS because he hasn't scored a touchdown in 12 games dating back to last year. But he's kind of gone the last 2 games. He's starting to get targeted very heavily. He's been targeted on 26% of his routes the past 2 games. It was just 15% for the season prior than that. Ryan Grant got hurt. I mean, they are playing a guy they signed off the practice squad over Terrell Pryor now. Josh Doxson's going to see Marshawn Lattimore. He's got another, just bad. Josh Doxson just run into like a litany of bad draws on the perimeter. So, I mean, it's going to be a game where I think it's going to be, Vernon Davis. Obviously, if Jordan Reed is out, Vernon Davis has been a top 5-6 tight end every week that he's been out. Chris
Big
Thompson.
Vern.
And Jamison Crowder. We want to hone in the middle of the field there. That's where it's at. I mean, that's where you want to attack the Saints, man. Put those linebackers in coverage still, and that's what we want to do work on.
So between Crowder and Big Vern, Evan, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So who do you prefer?
The biggest regret that I have from last week, and I seriously considered doing it on Sunday, was just switching out all my Brait to Big Vern, and that would have been a massive, massive shift.
Yeah.
And I switched some of them, but it really crossed my mind to just shift it all to Big Vern because I knew that Big Vern would be really low owned because people just didn't really know until Sunday morning whether he was even an option, and I knew that Brait was going to just kicking myself for that. I mean, that's like a 14-point swing even on FanDuel last week, and that was something that I wish that I would have done. Doxson is like the most hyped player in fantasy I've ever seen that has not done anything.
You hate Doxson so much.
I really don't. I see hype about him every single week, and he hasn't done anything. I mean, he doesn't even get targets. Like he doesn't get big targets. He has bad matchups every week. He's still learning how to play the game at the NFL level, and I mean, I'm sure he's going to have a big game one of these games. But this is a Vernon Davis, Jamison Crowder, Chris Thompson game. That's where you beat the Saints, and that's where the targets go anyways in the Redskins offense. So those are the guys to look at.
Yeah, Chris Thompson. I mean, I know Reeves, you said maybe it's on FanDuel. 5.4K on DK for Chris Thompson seems perfectly reasonable to me, at least. I mean, especially if you think the Saints are going to put up points. The nice thing is Chris Thompson, he can't get games scripted out. He's going to catch passes. Mm-hmm. He's going to rush the ball. I like Chris Thompson plenty. Let's go on to the Chiefs and the Giants. Reeves, is there anything you want to show the people?
Yeah, it is a Jesus Smith week. He's probably, I don't think that there's a better quarterback play on the board than Alex Smith this week. I mean, it's, when you get to this point in the season, we do this every fantasy season. We're to the point now where we're looking at specific defenses and we know we can just hammer them every week. And that is what the Giants have turned to. Every week we pull up the slate and say who's playing the Giants. And it just so happens they are playing a team that has been one of the best offenses in the NFL. But historically, Andy Reid teams just smash coming out of the byes. They're 16-2 coming out of byes in Andy Reid's career. And, the matchup just couldn't set up on paper any better. If it was in Kansas City, is the only way it could be better. I mean, the Giants are allowing the most passing points per pass attempt to opposing passers. Alex Smith's second in the league in that category. The Giants have allowed 10 touchdowns from outside the red zone. That's the most in the league. The Chiefs are second in that category. The Giants have allowed 48% of their passing yards on completions of 20 or more yards. It's 31st in the league. 41% of Alex Smith's passing yards come on those types of throws. That's the highest rate in the league. Kareem Hunt, if you want to flip to Kareem Hunt, I mean, he's a guy that people haven't wanted to play because he hasn't scored, since week 3. But the Chiefs just haven't really gotten – we talked about it with the Saints backs and rushing touchdowns being, more circumstantial where you are in the field. Well, the Chiefs are just bypassing, the point of the field to get Kareem Hunt touchdowns. Since his last touchdown in week 3, the Kansas City Chiefs have run 5 total plays inside the opponent's 5-yard line. That is only the Bears and the Giants have run less. But they're still scoring just boatloads of points. I mean, for them to not have that many opportunities and still score all these points, eventually that's going to flip and come around. And the Giants have just gotten, since they've come off a bye, have just gotten crushed on the ground by the Rams and the 49ers the past 2 weeks. There's not a Chiefs dude I don't think you can't play in this game. Travis Kelce is egregiously underpriced on both sides, I think, for the matchup, given his production. No one has more 100-yard receiving games since the start of last season than Travis Kelce. They should have made him basically, like $9K on each site just to make us work for it, because he's probably going to be the highest owned player, I feel, this weekend.
Probably justified. Evan, I expected last week, and I know we talked about Eli Manning last week, I thought if the Giants were going to maybe not turn this thing around, but at least show a little bit of pride, it was going to happen last week. Just, going into San Fran, a game that they should, in theory, have had a shot in. And obviously they just got killed there. It's tough for me to ever have faith in the Giants defense or offense, to be honest, going forward.
Yeah, I mean, their offense showed up a little bit. I mean, Shepard came out. He rocked. Yeah. I hope he played a lot of Sterling Shepard last week. I think he's still in a solid price range, even on FanDuel, where he doesn't really fit that FanDuel archetype at 6,500. I mean, he legitimately has a shot at 10 to 15 targets every single week. And Chiefs slot coverage, I mean, they switched out their slot corners recently, but the dude they put in, Steven Nelson, he got beat for 2 touchdowns in the last game by Cole Beasley. I want to talk a little bit about the Ty Freak, though, man, the Freak show, because he has these crazy home road splits this year. It's been ridiculous, and it's definitely skewed by matchup. He's had better matchups in away games, but he's been the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 17, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 18 in away games. On the road, at home, he's been the wide receiver 45, wide receiver 51, wide receiver 43, wide receiver 57. So huge differential there. And I see no reason that would stop here against the Giants. If you've watched the Giants recently, they don't tackle. They're the least disciplined defense in the league. They blow coverages constantly. I haven't seen Janoris Jenkins play well since like week 3. The Giants on the season have given up the second most completions of 20-plus yards and the 4th most completions of 40-plus yards, and a lot of those have been stuffed into the last couple of weeks. So, what does Tyreek Hill do well? He creates big plays, and the Giants give up big plays. And so I really, really like Tyreek. As Reeves mentioned, really, really like Travis Kelce. I mean, who wouldn't? Any tight end. Garrett Selleck, 14 catches in his 4-year college career, is like a fantasy tight end against this defense. I mean, that is just pathetic. I wanted to mention one concern. Apparently there are some weather concerns in this game. It's friggin' Wednesday, and I don't freak out about any weather until like Sunday morning until it starts moving lines. But I know that, by Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're going to be getting a lot of questions. Should I play this guy? I mean, it's raining, so that's going to pop up a lot. And I'll tell you right now, the answer for me is I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
I've never made a good decision, when I've ever made a decision that was based on the weather for my own fantasy teams, it has never worked out. It has never worked out positively. I mean, I'm telling you right now. So I don't know. So, good luck. You guys are on your own with the weather stuff.
I desperately hope that we get to a situation on Sunday morning. Let's say that it looks like it's going to rain and people are going to be, well, I can't play Tyreek Hill or Kareem Hunt now. And we just get to sit around and say, well, defenders slip in the rain too. And guys like Tyreek Hill, where they know where they're going, as opposed to, these defenders who have to, they're trying to keep up. Like, that could get really ugly for some of those defenders.
The rain absolutely can be a positive for the offense. I mean, there's no question about that. The defense, they have to backpedal. If you're a cornerback, you have to backpedal. Think about backpedaling versus running forward, when it's muddy. What would you rather be doing? I think I know what I would rather be doing.
I'd rather sit inside and watch the games on TV. So we mentioned the Giants and Sterling Shepard. He's 6,300 on DK. Reeves, is he pretty much the only option on the Giants that you're looking for this week?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at him. I mean, you can flirt with Eli if you want to do something interesting. I mean, it's a similar spot. I mean, the Chiefs' defense is really just as bad. They're really bad across the board unanimously. And Eli's in a similar spot. Like this game, I mean, if the weather isn't a factor, I mean, the over is hitting in this game, right? Like we kind of agree there.
There's money on the over today.
Yeah, I would think so. When this line first came out, I said this is an over spot for sure, because I mean the Giants are still going to score 2 or 3 touchdowns. Is what they do. Evan Ingram has been a solid play. You can play him. I mean, it's a very concentrated usage tree now. We can count on them to throw a lot, and it's going to go. The targets are going to Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard, and Eli's he got there last week. I mean, if you played him, like I told you, I kind of have a strict no Eli Manning rule, so I don't play him. But I mean, he was there QB 12, and it's a similar spot. The Chiefs are 25th in passing points allowed per game. To circle back on Evan's point, I mean, the Giants have allowed 5 touchdowns to wide receivers their past 3 games, and 4 of those have been 35 yards or longer. So, I mean, if there's one dude that's going to do it this week, I mean, it's going to be, Tyreek Hill or Demarcus Robinson from 3 weeks ago.
Not that again. No, not Demarcus. That did not end well.
That was painful. That was painful.
But I think the big 4, you're looking at the big 4 on the Chiefs side, and you're looking at Ingram and you're looking at Shepard for your game stacking purposes in this game. And it's a game that I'm probably going to have a lot of ownership in for tournaments, and a lot of other people will too. It just depends what you pair them with. I mean, and then Kelsey is the obvious cash game play.
I did want to give Demarcus Robinson, though, a shout in that Dallas game where we all played him. He had a great block on Tyreek's, what do they call it? Like the dump off Hail Mary? Or
the Hail Mary is what they called it.
The Hail Mary? Okay. He had a great block on that play. So, shouts.
Yeah. Thanks, Demarcus.
Are you guys Are you guys playing Kareem Hunt? Like, are you guys? How do you guys feel in the Kareem Hunt situation that he's not hit for us? But
I mean, right. I feel like running back touchdowns are really high variance, and eventually it's going to go the other way for Kareem Hunt. That's how I feel it. It's you mentioned that they give up a lot of big plays in the passing game. They give up a ton in the running game too. Like Kareem Hunt, again, a guy like that who can just crush it in those spots. I will probably have either Hill, Kelsey, or Hunt on every single lineup I build this weekend. And you guys know I'm going to build my 300 lineups because that's how I roll. All right, let's talk about our third game. It's New England and Oakland. It's in Mexico City, not Oklahoma City. That 53.5 total. That total's already moved up 2 points. New England 6.5 point favorites. Evan, with the New England offense, Chris Hogan, he's probably going to be out. I mean, we know it. Like last week, the question was, well, is it going to be James White? It was going to be Deion Lewis, Rex Burkhead. Well, guess what? It was all of them. Which is there a particular running back you're looking toward this week? I know the answer is yes.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, are you kidding me? Oh, everybody likes Rex Burkhead now, huh? Yeah. Interesting.
We were a week early, baby. We were there.
Yeah. Burkhead is the man. You know, he's just really good at the game. He's good at everything that he does. He's like taking snaps away from James White. He's just really good, dude, and he's gonna ball here. The Raiders have given up the sixth most catches and seventh most receiving yards to opposing running backs. Rex Burkhead led all Patriots running backs in snaps last week. He can run inside. He can block punts on special teams. They give it to him in scoring position. They throw it to him on angle routes. I mean, everything to like about it. Isn't his price $3,600 on DK?
Yeah.
Lock button.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know why. Like, maybe they, and I understand they had the primetime game, so the numbers came out earlier, so they didn't get their right adjustment with Burkhead. But I mean, did you happen to see the ownership with Burkhead and James White on the night slate last week?
You know what? I forgot to check when I did it. I'll tell
you, and I'm just doing this by memory. James White was right around 50%. Burkhead 16%. And I think that actually might be flip-flop this week because everybody this week, hey guys,
I played him in 100% of Monday, Thursday games. I just haven't checked to see how they were doing. I don't really pull those up until this game gets underway and we get a feel for that. So you never want to be teased, man, when you get on the right guys.
Look how excited Reeves is now that he found out how low owned Burkhead was. He's like, oh really? Maybe I'll just pull those up and give him a little victory lap. But yeah,
those are already over though. That was not the Monday night game. That was the Sunday night game.
Yeah. So that one was. But
I had him and it didn't matter because I didn't have. I think I had more Gronk than Ed Dixon and not enough.
Everybody had more Gronk than Ed Dixon.
Yeah. No McCaffrey. There's some kill. The Panthers put up so many points that I only had Funchess was like the only dude I had a piece of outside of Cam.
Curtis Samuel is very hurt. Curtis Samuel is very hurt.
Yeah, so that was a killer.
So anyways, this New England offense, we love Burkhead. What do we do with Lewis, White, Brandon Cooks, Rob Gronk? I mean, there are so many different ways we can go that I don't think one piece is enough in this game.
So I asked Reeves said before that he likes Alex Smith as the best quarterback play on the slate. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Brady is the best play, right?
Well, it would cost factored in.
Cost relative. Okay.
Yeah. Alex is 67 on DK, and he's priced the same as Goff on FanDuel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is just a monster smash spot for Brady and Gronk, and I think a lot of people probably played Gronk as they should have last week against the Broncos. Are those people going to shy away from him here because this is as good as it gets.
I think they'll shy away. I just think more will play Kelsey, and they're not going to pay him a double tight end.
Okay, yeah. So the Raiders are terrible against tight ends. I mean, A.J. Derby lit him up. Vernon Davis lit him up. Travis Kelce had a good game against him. Delaney Walker lit him up. Julius Thomas had his only good game all year. He had a monster game against him. Hunter Henry 5 for 90. This is another awesome spot for Gronk, for Brady. Dion Lewis, the thing that kind of stinks about him, he entered the league like projected to be sort of like a passing down back. They don't even use him in the passing game. He has multiple catches in just 3 of his 9 games. So he needs to be cheap on DK, really, I think, to be a good play. I do think he's a good bet for a touchdown. I mean, a relatively good bet for a touchdown. And I think he'll get like 13 to maybe 17 touches. The matchup is great. But they really don't use him in the passing game. And that is, that's a concern for his floor and certainly for his outlook on DraftKings.
So talk about Brandon Cooks real quick because he has been close so many times to absolutely going off, and it just hasn't really seemed to happen yet. Is this the week it's going to happen?
Yeah, he actually, for the stigma of being a volatile player, he's actually had a pretty, stable floor. And, some of that came last week. They were pumping him wide receiver screens when they were up 20, boosting his output. But he's been solid. I was looking to pull up, because I didn't have it ready because we were going there. this is a game where we would like to use him because, those long Raiders cornerbacks we always talk about. I mean, he's a speed guy. He torched them last year in that week 1 game when we were on that game kind of being a shootout. But his grass splits are kind of bad, aren't they?
I mean,
we're playing it. I mean, you're not going away from him, but he's been a guy that typically, you want to get that in that fast track, like a T.Y. Hilton like type of guy for that big ceiling to hit. But the matchup is there. I mean, the Raiders are allowing the second most, fantasy points per target to wide receivers. They're giving up big plays. I mean, he's a guy that's still going to hit. Overall, their production is limited because they're just getting crushed by backs and tight ends out of the passing game, like Evan kind of alluded to. I mean, they're 30th in receiving points out of backfields, which is the worst type scenario when you're facing a team like New England, because they might just come with the same game plan and just bleed them to death like they've done the last 2 teams with those backs. They've shown that they're willing to do that their past 2 games against the Chargers and the Broncos. Now, neither of the Raiders guys, their boundary corners aren't as good here, so it opened up more for the other guys. But Hogan's going to miss again. He's not going to play. Amendola really has done like nothing of significant note except for when like Gronk hasn't done anything. When Gronk didn't play and when Gronk didn't do anything in week 1, that's kind of when Amendola's popped. So I mean, we're looking at Cooks, we're looking at the running backs, we're looking at Gronk, and we're looking at Brady. I think it's pretty clear that's where you want to focus. When you're looking at this thing. So Burkhead, Gronk, Cooks, Brady.
I wanted to mention that this game, so it's in Mexico. It's played at altitude. So
I have this written down. Hold on. Wait. I have this. I'm excited because I wrote this down. Oh, I got to find it. Hold on. Oh yeah. The elevation in Mexico City, 7,382. And by comparison, that is 2,100 feet higher than Denver. Play Denver, boys.
Right. So, the Patriots did play in Denver last week. So they've already at least got some experience, just last week having played, at altitude. And I'm sure that Belichick is going to have them very prepared for this. The Raiders also played at altitude last year. They played in Mexico. They played the Texans in Mexico. So, Derek Carr on the other side, and we just flip it to the other side. Derek Carr has been very, very boom or bust this year in terms of his fantasy results. The guys that I'm looking at over here are Amari Cooper. He's got 9 or more targets in 3 straight games. I know everybody hates him right now, but I think if you're going to bring it back, I think you want to bring it back with one of these guys. And for me, it's Amari. I also get Crabtree for sure. But the way that you get after the Patriots, and they have not been giving up a lot of points lately because they played a lot of teams that really don't score a lot of points, or they're catching a team in the fog, or they're catching a West Coast team at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I mean, their schedule is just so ridiculously favorable. Even when they play like halfway decent teams, they're catching them in like amazing spots, amazingly favorable spots. But you can get after their cornerbacks. I mean, like Malcolm Butler couldn't cover Emmanuel Sanders last Sunday night, and Demaryius also had a good game. So I think we're looking at these wideouts. I also think that Jared Cook deserves a mention. He is a guy that no one really talks about, I feel like, and he's 7th among tight ends and 4th in yards. And Austin Seferian-Jenkins had a good game against the Pats. Cameron Brate, Ryan Griffin, Kobe Fleener, Ed Dixon, giving up good games to a lot of different tight ends. And so I think that these wide receivers and this tight end, they're all in really good spots. We have significant money already on the over. Reeves, how are you feeling about Derek Carr and you for beast mode?
Beast mode's a little tricky. I do want to say I do like Jared Cook a lot. If you look at the past 3 games, he's been a tight end 1. He's actually been a tight end 1 now in out of the 7 full games Derek Carr has played. Jared Cook's been a tight end 1 in 5 of them. And he's got 200-yard games. He's the only other tight end outside of Travis Kelce to have multiple 100-yard games in the season. He's actually, since he started getting going, we saw Crabtree's production kind of start to slip here. And Crabtree was never like a real high yardage guy to begin with. So, Cook's starting to get a lot of targets, and it's kind of taken away a little bit. It's starting to turn like a 3-headed monster instead of a 2-headed monster. Amari, I like a lot. Like, he's very similar type of receiver to Emmanuel Sanders, who gave the business to Malcolm Butler last week. You like Amari? I like Amari a little bit more now because we've had the big game against the Chiefs, but the last 2 games he's at least had a floor. He's still been a wide receiver 3 at least, the past 2 weeks. He's given you something, not just these. I mean, he was giving you zeros, for stretches there. You're getting at least production to build off of now, instead of just saying I might get nothing out of this spot. He's actually more expensive now than Crabtree and DraftKings this week. But Carr is interesting because if you look at, he's got 3 300-yard games in a row. 2 of those games, he threw 52 passes and 49 passes. And that's something to similar total we might see go down here. It just depends on what kind of pacing we get, because the Patriots are kind of using that intermediate passing game now as, their rushing game until late in the games. So I mean, it's kind of turning into where there might not be it might not be as back and forth as we want, but there's potential for it to get there. And Derek Carr is another guy that's just had some kind of crummy touchdown luck for as many yards as he's throwing for. I mean, he's just got 1 touchdown each of the past 2 games. Have thrown for a ton of yards. Marshawn, I think the matchup is good, but you're still at the mercy of just him getting in the end zone. The touches still, we talk about this, and it's very interesting because I still contend that Marshawn has been fine all year. He's played well. To me, he still passes the eyeball test. He's making guys miss. He's getting positive runs. They just have yet to just say, we're going to give you the ball 20 times. Even last week, I mean, he was running hot against Miami. He's got 15 carries. I mean, I don't understand. And that game's in the rain and on a terrible field, and where you should want to run Marshawn Lynch a bunch of times, and they've just been unwilling to do it. So I mean, in a shootout, are you going to play a guy that has multiple touchdown potential in the tournament? Sure, you will, and he's super cheap on both sites. But I mean, you see a guy I'm actively trying to push into lineups, probably not. But I'm going to get a little bit just because they don't. We've been here. I mean, I want to keep pushing the button on him because the touchdown potential and how he's looked on the field, but they just don't want to give him the football.
Yeah, and the problem with Marshawn, and that's exactly right, and he has been fine, but I don't. If he ever has a game where he gets 25 touches, I'm not going to profit from it. I'm not going to be playing him at all. I don't think I played him a single time this week or this year. It's not going to start this week, and now we're all the way to week 11. I don't think I'm going to end up playing him this year. Evan, what do you feel about Marshawn?
Yeah, I mean, in that game against the Dolphins, those were all season highs that he said. He was 60% of the snaps. He was, I think, 18 touches or 16 touches. That was his most since week 1. That was a good matchup. He did well in it. I agree with Reeves that he's looked good. You can absolutely run on the Patriots. I mean, they give up 5 yards per carry flat to opposing RBs. They're 29th in run defense DVOA. I wish they would commit to him as a feature back, but they have shown no intentions of doing so. And they're just they're like a scatterbrained team. I don't understand what they do on really either side of the ball. They put on a clinic in suboptimal decision making from a defensive and offensive standpoint. And, that's why a lot of their players in fantasy are very frustrating, honestly. And that's why they're one of the reasons that their defense is so bad. I mean, they have a lot of good players on defense. They really do. Major holes on defense, but, they have shown coaches should be able to maximize the strengths of their players and minimize the weaknesses of their personnel. And they have, they do the opposite of that. And they're bottom 5 coach team, I think, in the NFL.
It sounds like you're describing the Chargers, even though I know you're not.
They're right down there with them.
It's the way you were talking right there, it easily could have been the Chargers. I know it was the Raiders, but it easily could have been the Chargers. Let's move on to bounce backs. I have a guy this week. I think Melvin Gordon might bounce back, though I don't know what to think about this running back situation. And I'm glad we're on this show because, Evan, this is a you question right here, buddy. What is going to happen with this Chargers running back situation?
I mean, I have biases sometimes, and I try to talk about my biases and admit my biases and embrace them as opposed to trying to cover them up, and let them bleed into, the things that I think. My biggest bias is against players that are bad. Okay. And, of course, against teams that are bad, but my biggest bias is definitely against players that are bad. And so I will never play Melvin Gordon. I mean, I just decided I will never play him. and that's going to cost me money sometimes, and I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to move forward because he stinks. And Austin Eckler is pretty good. And that's why you saw last week, in crunch time, they're giving touches to Austin Eckler. Now, Austin Eckler blew it because he lost a fumble that essentially cost him the game or contributed to them losing the game.
Yeah, both teams tried the game.
But Austin Eckler, 4 weeks in a row, snap rate up, 15 touches last week playing in crunch time. So, I just, you can play Melvin Gordon, go ahead. But I'm not going to play him. He stinks.
Reeves, who's your bounce back candidate this week?
I like Mike Evans. This week. We talked about it with AJ Green last week, kind of coming off of, it's a narrative, but, coming off an embarrassing moment, a guy that's, he's had 2 duds now and a suspension. We know he's a really good player and a really good talent. I mean, he's going against just, that game on Monday night, man. I mean, I think Evan has fired off a couple of tweets about it. I mean, the Dolphins are probably the least talented team in the NFL, especially defensively. You just watched the clinic that a team like the Panthers, that you have Cam Newton throwing for 5 yards a pass attempt over the previous month and looked like 2015 Cam, MVP Cam in that game. Their secondary is awful. They're 31st in points allowed per target to opposing wide receivers, 28th in touchdown rate allowed to the position. They are another team that's giving up long touchdowns to receivers. So I mean, Mike Evans is going to have a shot to make some plays in that game. I also like Keenan Allen. I mean, he's been bad. Top 30 scorer now in just one of his past 7 games. The targets really have started to dry up for him a little bit. But when you look at, Buffalo, Buffalo is just getting roasted by lead wide receivers. And these guys are starting to put up, big games on them, continuously. Michael Thomas had 9 for 117 last week. Robbie Anderson, 4 for 48 and 1. Crabtree had 5 for 83 the week before that. Evans, 7, 88 and 1. 7, 189 and 1 before that. Julio got knocked out of the game. Demaryius Thomas the week for that, 6 for 98. Kelvin Benjamin, 6 for 77. It's just a continuous run of production that Keenan Allen's capable of producing. A lot of catches for a moderate amount of yards for where he's priced, because his price has dropped across the border, especially on DK where he's suited. I mean, now that we're contingent because Philip Rivers is going through concussion protocol and he just needs to be cleared by a doctor not associated with the Chargers to pass. Signs look promising early in the week, but you never want to take that for granted at this stage of the week. So I mean, if Rivers doesn't play, obviously eject as fast as that. But those 2 guys I like a lot, the receiver position for where they're priced.
Evan, who's your bounce back candidate?
I got a couple. I don't think I'm going to make a Thursday lineup without Antonio Brown in it.
Oh,
yeah. I think he's going to be 100%. I like Jordan Howard. Now, Jordan Howard, so he was maybe the highest owned running back in fantasy or in daily fantasy last week. Was anybody owned higher? Maybe Le'Veon?
Powell.
I played zero
Powell,
Jordan Howard last week.
Bilal Powell for sure. Yeah. You were on the right side of that, Reeves. That's smart.
I wasn't.
No, most people weren't. He was super high owned. I mean, he was super high owned. I played a lot of them. But he's in almost the exact same spot as last week. His price is down a little bit. He's not going to no one's going to want to play him now because he burned everyone. Mm-hmm. People have respect for the Lions defense that just got smashed by Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. And I think that Jordan Howard is a very interesting tournament play. I think he's almost strictly on FanDuel. He's got to get in the box at least twice on DK to really help you. I mean, he doesn't catch passes at all. He didn't even have a target last week, and they were trailing the entire game. So I think he's very site specific unless he can rip 2 or 3 TDs. But I think an awesome tournament play this week. And then the Broncos defense. So the Broncos defense, so the Broncos defense is embarrassed, shamed. I mean, there's a lot of narrative here, but there's also, just the fact that they're playing the Bengals, who are 28th in Football Outsiders adjusted sack rate, coming to Denver. I think the Broncos are gonna mess them up. Now, I have thought that the Broncos were gonna do things before, and they did not do those things. them not doing these things really wouldn't surprise me. But I'm telling you, I mean, I'm going to play a lot of Broncos D this week. I think the Chargers probably on a price basis, probably the best defensive play. You know, I think they're your cash game defense, but man, the Broncos are an amazing spot. Like, they should rip if they come to play, which sometimes they don't. You know, if they come to play here, they should rip this Bengals offensive line to shreds.
I mean, after getting beat this week and, well, the week before, and not even doing well against Kansas City, if Denver doesn't come to play this week, I think they might have some problems there. All right, let's talk about quarterbacks. Now, it's a fun week at quarterback because we talked about some of the guys that we like. We talked about Brady, obviously, in a smash spot. Alex Smith, you know, Reeves is wearing an Alex Smith shirt. We got Derek Carr as, you know, a guy who could absolutely go off. But there are a number of streamers this week. Reeves, kind of talk about some of these cheaper options that we have this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is what makes it fun, man. I think that, you know, a lot of people played Ryan Fitzpatrick lineups last week. I noticed that he was heavy, but he didn't really hit, but like everyone played him, so it was kind of neutral. You know, it was just what else you had around him. He had that late touchdown that kind of bailed him out just for at least just kind of getting close to just doubling up, but that was it. He's in another good spot. Like I said, if you watch the game Monday night, like how do you not think like I probably want to own a little bit of for Ryan Fitzpatrick again? We talked about the Dolphins defense.
Nobody's playing him this week.
I mean, he has to be on the board, I feel like, because where he's priced. I mean,
I agree with you, but nobody's playing him this week.
Yeah, I mean,
he's going to be under 5%.
You got Bortles. I know Bortles is a little high on FanDuel, higher than I want him to be compared to where I could just go up to Alex Smith, like someone that has a really high ceiling. But then we've also got Blaine Gabbert on the board now, who's QB min priced. Konami Gabbert, that is.
Yeah.
You know, look at last year. He averaged 5.9 rushing points per game in his starts last year. If you look at what he did last year with the 49ers and a team that had basically no production, I mean, look at the points he had. Week 1, he had 14.5 points, 20.7 points. He had one ultimate dud that'll keep you off, but it was at Seattle with 5 points. Then he had 12.5 points, 19.5 points in those games. And he's a guy that can use his legs. He can run. He can get the ball to Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, that's really all he can do is like throw like in between the hashes. That's like really his only strength as a passer, if we want to call it a strength. But I mean, he can throw in between the hashes. He's capable of doing that. At min price, dude, like he's gonna run. It's a very similar thing that we talked about. And we haven't even talked about the matchup yet. Like what Houston is just. They have nobody healthy. They're getting just decimated, you know, by quarterback play, and they're giving up a lot of rushing yards to the quarterbacks. Is you know, one of the things. So I mean, it's kind of, you know, made the play here that if you're gonna just punt the position, like he's got to be in play. I know no one wants to click on Blaine Gabbert's name, but I mean, dude, you just close your eyes and take the points, man.
Over the last 2 years, when Blaine Gabbert started, over half of passes have gone up the middle of the field, which we know that's where Larry Fitzgerald runs. That's going to be at Kareem Jackson a lot. And Evan, I know that you know that Kareem Jackson is just not very good.
Yeah, my dude this week is definitely Brady. I mean, I think he's going to really smash against the Raiders. Carson Wentz on Sunday Night Football, I think, can have a really big game against Dallas. No Sean Lee. That matters versus both the pass and the run. Russ on Monday night against the Falcons. Just playing Russ every single week, you know, it's come to that. Their running game is so bad. Their defense is, you know, not as good without a couple of key players. They lost Cliff Averill. They lost Richard Sherman. They're gonna have to score. I think the Falcons can actually go to Seattle and score too. I like a lot of the matchups for the Falcons pass catchers. Kirk Cousins, I think, you know, this is a high total game. I think you could play him with Chris Thompson, Vernon Davis.
Yeah, we didn't talk about him.
Yeah, Crowder. I think he's a very good play. I know that I have, you know, mass respect for the Saints defense, and I don't doubt it for a second. But I think that Kirk can get his. I mean, he got his against the Vikings pass defense too, you know. And then this game is indoors. People want to play Cutler this week. So
really,
yeah. I mean, I've gotten a lot of questions about Cutler this week. In football, in fantasy football.
He's all right.
Yeah, so he's had one game above quarterback 16 on the year. And that happened to be against the Raiders, who Tom Terrific, is playing this week, by the way. But Jay Cutler, he's been good in fantasy 1 week, hasn't even been mediocre beyond that week. And then, I mean, I think that this Bucs defense could do what it did last year, which was you remember we were attacking it every single week in the first half of last year. Was that one of the weeks did you win the Millie with Derek Carr? Yeah, dude. Yeah. Okay.
That was no. Wait. Hold on. It was the game. I think it was an overtime game actually.
That was the Bucs Raiders game.
Bucs Raiders game. Okay. Yeah, Amari went off, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it just stopped. Like it just stopped. Like 1 week, I think it was a game against Jay Cutler that it stopped. Like I'm not even kidding. I think it was the game that yeah. And then the Bucs defense was great the rest of the way. Like, you could play him you could play the Bucs defense. But in the first half of the year, and I mean, look, this is not like, some advanced analysis here, right? but they're getting all their guys are healthy. Vernon Hargreaves got hurt. That may actually be a positive for them.
Can't be any worse.
Their front is healthy now, and for the most part, they've lost some guys. But for they played really well against the Jets last week. I mean, they entered that game with 8 sacks on the year. They had 6 sacks in that game alone. The Jets couldn't do anything on offense until Robbie Anderson caught that garbage time touchdown, which I had a lot of Robbie Anderson last week too. So thank our lucky stars for that. But I really think that they can finish strong here. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Reeves, talk me into Cutler.
I mean, from a DFS standpoint, I'm not going to play him because there are just too many other guys that I feel better about in the price range. But I will say from a season-long standpoint, I do think he's a streamer as well because I think this game sets up very similarly to how they would approach the game plan against Oakland 2 weeks ago. I mean, you have a Buccaneers team that you're going to attack with the running backs out of the backfield, which we know that they want to do. And, you can, in Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker have plus matchups as well. So I think it's going to be a game where it's going to be high volume, short passing, get the ball out of Cutler's hands. One of those type of situations where he has, he goes like 27 of 39, but the yards per attempt are like 6.5, something small. So I think he can nickel and dime his way to like a solid fantasy line as long as he doesn't really turn the rock over. I think it just similarly to the Raiders game, but I mean, you need a team to score points and opposite, and I don't know if the Bucs can really score points enough to really make that happen. But I think that the thing getting rid of Ajayi was he was just a black hole of not being able to do what Adam Gase wants to do as an offense, and he's kind of hinted at that, and they've done it. I mean, listen, we knew they were going to get smashed in Carolina, but they weren't going to do anything in that game. But I go back to that Raiders game. And that's the kind of offense Gase wants to run. It's what he had success with Cutler in Chicago. When they had Martellus Bennett and Matt Forte, he wants to throw to those backs out of the backfield. They can't really line up and run the football like they're doing with Ajayi. It didn't make sense for them to have some success here with the backs out of the passing game and Jarvis Landry and even Devontae Parker, considering where he's priced on a site like FanDuel. Pop one of these weeks, man, for where he's priced. I mean, he's been a great floor play. He's kind of given us like those Robert Woods lines, but it's like, come on, man, like we know you're capable. Like
Robert Woods.
Old Robert Woods.
Yeah, not new Robert.
Yeah. But where he's just kind of giving you those wide receiver 3 weeks, those 5 for 60s, those 5 for 70s, and you just can't get over the hump. But like they're gonna happen, it feels like. And he's looked great too, and he's making plays. Just haven't, you need those tutties, man. Like you got to get in the end zone.
I like him this week for sure. So we had a listener question to rank the streamers. So I got 5 of them. Okay, can you guys do this?
I'm ready.
All right. I mean, we have to be loyal. We only have 4 people watch this show, so we have to be loyal to this is a quarter of our fan base. Okay. Jay Cutler, Eli Manning, Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Blake Bortles.
Okay, so here I'm going to start it out. I know who's number 1, and he's number 1 on all of our lists.
Let's go bottom up.
Okay. I'm going to go with Cutler first.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, last. Okay,
yeah, last.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. Last. So we'll go bottom up.
He's like, oh my, he goes, thank God. He was gonna, Evan, you have to look me in the eye here in like 2 or 3 days. You're really going to lose a lot of respect for me if I said. All All right. After that, I'm going to go Eli.
Nah.
I'll say Fitzpatrick.
Me too. I'm going
Really?
Fitzpatrick too. Yeah.
Wow. Fitzpatrick is a lot higher on my list than your guys.
Okay.
All right.
I'm into him still. I just think that these guys are all. I mean, we're getting brass tacks here.
Is Bortles third?
I will say Eli third now.
Okay.
I have Gabbert. No. I have Bortles third.
Okay.
See, I look at Bortles though, man, and it's gonna be hard because Bortles has had 16 or more points in 3 straight games, and the Browns have allowed a top 10 guy in 5 of their past 7. And when you look at the guys that have put up these games against the Browns, I mean, it was Matt Stafford last week, but Case Keenum, Josh McCown, Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett. Really hard to say like Bortles isn't going to flirt. I mean, eventually their game script's going to take over here, but I mean, he's got to flirt with 20.
There's expected to be. Oh, so you're in that area, Rich. Have you looked at the weather in your area? What it's supposed to be like this weekend?
No, because I mean, I looked outside today. I didn't go outside, but I looked out there.
Yeah. No,
I mean, dude,
this
is we're at the point of the year like where I live, man. Like I'm not even like it's just gray for like 6 months.
Oh, me too, man. Me too.
We're all in the Midwest. We all know
it's awful, man. But I mean, I'm with you though, man. Like I tend to not freak out about the weather, especially this earlier in the week. I tend not to freak out at all because, like you said, most decisions made are suboptimal. Unless we have a game like that Eagles-Lions game a few years ago where like you're looking, dudes are tweeting live pictures like, hey, dude, this looks like Planet Hoth out here. You might want to sit some dudes. That's like that's really it. Like other than that,
LaShawn McCoy like score 4 touchdowns in that game too or something.
Jeremy Ross ran like 2 kicks back. That was remember everyone was riding Nick Foles. That was in the middle of like the Nick Foles mega streak, and people were like, "What do? You got to sit Nick Foles." That was just like a really weird game.
Nick Foles know anything but that.
It was just a really weird. Like unless someone's showing me pictures like that where I like really like start to freak out. Like I really just don't even like let weather really play into like my decision making because I know wind is a significant factor, but wind is hard to predict. Like we don't usually know until it's in game. Because remember, there was a game a couple years ago. It was 2 years before when the Raiders played the Vikings, and everyone's like, "There's 30-mile-per-hour winds projected." All the weather analysts were like, "Yep, it's 30-mile-per-hour winds." They came out and both dudes threw for like 300 yards and like touchdown. It's like because it never happened in game. The weather never happened. The winds. So it's like one of those fickle. And we know wind is significant, but it's just one of those things that just it's so fleeting.
It's just
like how do you?
Yeah, Brady has had some monster snow games in the past. All right,
we know precipitation doesn't matter.
Right. Sorry, so I'm just going to rank these guys 1 through 5. Okay, I'm going with Eli number 1 against Kansas City. Love attacking that Kansas City defense. It pays off every time. I'm going with Gabbert, Konabi Code, as Reeves calls it. Number 2, I'm going Bortles. Number 3, although I might switch him above Gabbert. And then I'm going Fitzpatrick Cutler at 4 and 5.
I just want to play all the Gabbert this week. I love that the only place he targets is where Houston is. That's their biggest weakness. He's going to get some rushing points for me. I mean, Did you guys see him dancing around in that ballerina outfit last week?
How did he end up more than Dalton, man? How did they beat us to the punch on DK? How did they beat us to the punch on DK?
That's because the Broncos defense is going to score about 30 points this week. That's why. All right, let's talk real quick. Let's talk some wide receivers and tight ends. Reeves, who are some of the wideouts that we haven't discussed this week that you like?
Listen, I'm ready to talk about some gross play. I mean, it's like this. We're point of year, man. I want to talk about bad players and doing stuff. And I mean, a dude I guess that's perceived bad, but has been good the last 2 weeks. Dude, 4,500 on DraftKings is egregious. Jeremy Maclin against the Packers. He's been the wide receiver 14 in each of his weeks back from injury. It's another strong matchup. The Packers are 28th in points allowed to receivers. Demarius Randall's been completely terrible. He's the only guy we can count on in the Baltimore offense. I mean, I just look at his price, 4,500 on DK. I mean, in the I just look at Jeremy Maclin. I don't know how you don't play him, in cash lineups.
Who do you got? I hadn't thought about him at all.
I mean, I seriously, like we've talked about all the guys that I like. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Are there any tight ends that we haven't touched on? Because I understand like some people are going to want some other tight ends. To me, it's Kelsey, it's Gronk, and it's Cook. And guess what?
Big Vern.
And Big Vern.
Yeah, Big Vern.
I like anybody else. I think you're just getting too cute this week. That's sort of how I feel. And you can absolutely play 2 tight ends this week. So guys, we got to get off here. We got lineups to build. We got a little more research to do. Evan, I'm going to see you this weekend, right?
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm going to give you a big hug, dude.
That's good. Well, you're going to have to bend down very short. Are you going to play basketball with us on Saturday?
If I'm not too hungover, yes.
So that's a no. Okay. Reeves, there's still time to get your ticket. There's still time to get your hotel room. And hey, you can come snuggle with either one of these 2 good-looking big boys right here. We're big boys. So come on down, Nashville. It's going to be a good time. But we got to get off here now. Thanks so much for tuning in to RotoWorld DFS Pick 6, sponsored by RotoGrinders. For Rich Rebar, for Evan Silva, I'm Eric Crane. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.